What's up everyone, CEO here with the NES Season 5 draft recap video. If you've been following my channel for a while, you're probably wondering what the hell happened to the rest of my Season 4 stuff, because I kind of just stopped uploading it. Long story short, I honestly got a little depressed towards the end of last year and kind of just stopped uploading like anything, really. After the NES Season 4 ended for me, because I got bounced from the playoffs right away, I kind of just tried to take a brief hiatus from Pokemon a little bit and try to get my energy back into it. As you can tell from the channel, that basically just meant I was focusing on like Super Mario World stuff for a little while. As a heads up, that'll still be around because I do really like that game and other platformers and stuff. But I am intending on, at least as of right now, trying to do post-coms and stuff for the NES Season 5. I don't think it's going to have like a layout and be super fancy compared to other seasons, because honestly it took like hours for me to do post-coms for that kind of stuff. And while I actually probably will have time to do that, like I don't really have the energy to do it anymore. I ended up getting an upgraded position from where I was at before, which is nice because it means I get paid more, but it also means I have more to do at work. So quite honestly, like this is about the quality that you should expect for most of the videos for this. I'm not going to make it like intentionally low quality or anything, but I'm also not going to put a ton of time into editing. I'm also probably not going to write scripts, so if my commentary is all over the place, just kind of bear with me, I guess. But after all that recap, let me go ahead and introduce myself if you don't know me. Hi, I'm CEO. I'm the coach of the Oakland Mudbraiders, and this is my NES Season 5 draft. If you guys don't know what the NES is, we're a 16-team Pokemon League where coaches draft teams of 10 Pokemon and a Mega Pokemon. Basically, over the course of the draft, we're just kind of designing rosters that we can bring each week and kind of have a good matchup against other coaches, because each week we have to build a 6v6 team out of our rosters of 11, face off against each other, and whoever wins, obviously. So I've always personally compared it to fantasy football or baseball or whatever sport you play, I guess, meets competitive Pokemon, because you basically just draft rosters of things that you think will succeed across a bunch of different tiering stuff, which I'll sort of get into as I'm talking about my draft. But basically you want to make sure that you're hitting all of your tiers, hitting all of your like Pokemon that you want, hitting all of your like hazard removal and your speed tiers and all of that. So it ends up actually being like a very complicated draft that ends up taking a couple of hours. And the season's draft was actually a little bit more difficult because I ended up having to draft for MDS and the Detroit Darkrai as well. So most of my like thoughts and commentary from this are going to be kind of just like me actually looking through my team as it comes together for the first time. So sorry, it's all over the place, but in the first round I picked 9th overall because, like, as I kind of hinted at, I did really well last season and then got bounced immediately. So it is what it is. I'm back this season for a vengeance, and because I picked high, I was actually able to get a Pokemon that I've really wanted for a while. Honestly, even dating back to when it came out in Generation 6, even when it wasn't like nearly as good then as it is now. Just because I've always really liked the design of it. I've always really liked kind of what it I guess. Anyway, I drafted Zygarde. It's limited to Aura Break because Power Construct Zygarde is obviously like super broken. Like fucking Ubers doesn't even want it. Like I don't know why our league would. But basically Zygarde's a really nice offensive option that also has a surprising amount of bulk if you've never really faced the Zygarde before. Like most of the time people see Dragon Ground, just slap an HP Ice on it and think you'll be okay. Zygarde's normally bulky enough, even when you don't invest in anything, that it won't die from that HP Ice. And then if you happen to let it get set up with any kind of a Dragon Dance or a Coil or a Weakness Policy or anything like that, it ends up just being able to run train on pretty much any team. Also worth noting, because I feel like a lot of people don't really, like, basically everyone knows Zygarde at this point if you've been battling in Gen 7 because of 1,000 Arrows. Really cool ground type move that basically ignores the immunity that flying types normally have, or levitating mons normally have, or Pokemon with an air balloon normally have. And instead of being able to be immune from ground type moves, they just get hit by 1,000 Arrows, and 1,000 Arrows is a pretty strong move anyway. So it's basically just like being able to spam Earthquake without the one consequence of Earthquake that you can sometimes like hit ground type or non-grounded Pokemon. So It's really nice for stuff such as like Skarmory or Celesteela that would be weak to ground types if they were grounded, because Thousand Arrows basically has a neutral hit on them first, smacks them down to the ground like the move Smackdown would do, and then they're actually able to get hit super effectively for stuff. As a side note, I'm actually very excited to run Thousand Waves at some point in the season, because I actually believe it's a pretty solid move, especially in League format. I feel like being able to trap your opponent at all is very helpful, and if an opponent for some reason decides to go into something bulky on my side guard thinking that they can take it, I can just trap them and either Toxic Stall or just be able to set up all over them and run through the rest of the team. Other than that, honestly, I'm pretty excited to just explore Zygarde's move pool. It gets stuff like Glare as well, which is even better in Gen 7 now that we don't have Thunder Wave to spam quite as freely. Like, it's still 90% accurate, but I've missed enough Thunder Waves this generation to know that it's not free anymore. But honestly, Zygarde just has a lot of really cool stuff that, like, I could get into some of the like deeper sets that I have planned for it, but realistically, like, I just kind of want to show it off this season. It's a really bulky, really offensive Pokemon, but a 4x weakness to Ice, which is pretty easy to patch up in my opinion, especially since I have a lot of stuff that kind of counters it. And honestly, I really wanted a very good dragon this season because I like Flygon, but Flygon's not a very good dragon, and I feel like that kind of came back to bite me at some point in last season. And I want a very good ground type because, again, Flygon wasn't really the best ground type. Like, it had its moments where it was okay, but for the most part, it like kind of underwhelmed a lot of the time. So I basically just wanted to make sure that I got my upgraded thing with something that I was comfortable with, something that could actually take an Ice type attack, even though it's 4x weak to it, thanks to very nice HP, defense, and SpDef. Like one of my first practice games, I was actually no HP minus SpDef and still managed to take an HP Ice and sweep through stuff. So really excited to use Zygarde. Next up after this, Zygarde is my tier 1, by the way, and I pretty much decided that I was just going to go down the board until I filled everything out, kind of figure out what was still available to me at that point, and then kind of figure out my free points from there. Sometimes in drafts you want to just like load up on all your tier 1s right away because you know exactly what you want. After I got Zygarde, I was honestly just kind of trying to get whatever I could. I know in League format that Fairy Dragon Steel cores have proven their worth time and time again, so I decided to get a Steel type that I've always really wanted. Honestly, it's a Steel type that a coach that I heavily respect in our league, Danny, has used extremely well. Every time he's had it on his roster, he's made the playoffs. I think every time he's had it, he's actually made the finals outside of last season where he had to drop out during the playoffs. But I wanted to pick up Ferrothorn. I've never used Ferrothorn really outside of like a couple of games here and there. But it's another Pokemon that I kind of wanted to emphasize with this draft, kind of going back to my roots of bulky offense. And Ferrothorn kind of embodies that for me because it's a wall that has offensive capabilities. Like, base 94 attack is really good. Especially since Ferrothorn is stupidly slow, which means that its Gyro Balls are normally doing pretty much max damage to stuff, unless you have something that's like intentionally lowering its speed in order to be able to actually like not take max damage from a Gyro Ball. At which point you could just run Iron Head if you really wanted to and then still do damage anyway. So last season I was I'm going to say extremely comfortable with Kartana. But the one thing I didn't really like about it was the same thing that I didn't really like about Flygon, where it couldn't really take a 4x super effective hidden power from anything. And Kartana was an even worse example of that because it ended up dying to a hidden power fire Leafeon in the playoffs. So like literally anything could take down Kartana with an HP fire if it just happens to live a hit or happens to come in and outspeed. So I wanted stuff this season that ideally would not die in one hit unless something was like beyond setup. So Ferrothorn did that for me. It gave me a Stealth Rocker, it gave me a Spiker. I don't think Zygarde gets Stealth Rocks, right? Yeah, okay. So it gave me my Stealth Rocker, it gave me a Spiker, it gave me Leech Seed recovery, which is nice. It gave me a physical grass type and a physical steel type, which I always really like in draft format, honestly. I feel like grass isn't like the best offensive option, but when it comes to breaking down teams, I've found that grass stab is actually normally pretty good a lot of the time. Like a lot of people kind of know that grass isn't that big of an offensive threat a lot of the time, unless they have something like a Gastrodon or a Swampert, and then don't ever really prep for grass, so you just get to smack stuff with power whips and stuff all the time. Ferrothorn also gets stuff like knockoff, it gets stuff like taunt, it gets stuff like thunder wave if I want to do slow thunder waves and stuff. And I can actually run curse, that's kind of cool. But ooh, it gets mirror shot too. Does it get counter? So it doesn't get counter or is that metal burst or mirror shot? Because I don't care about mirror shot. I read that as metal burst and got excited that it had like a counter move, but it doesn't. So overall, there's a lot of really random things that Ferrothorn gets that I'm pretty excited to use. I drafted it mostly because I know it's a pretty successful hazard setter. Like, I want something that's going to be able to get the rocks up more games than not. Ferrothorn can do that for me. I didn't want it to be my only stealth rocker, which I'll get into in a little bit, but having something with stealth rocks, having something with spikes, having a really bulky wall that is pretty good at taking down stuff. If I want to run Iron Barbs, Rocky Helmet, stuff ends up taking a ridiculous amount of recoil. Just from trying to take down Ferrothorn. So overall it ends up being a pretty nice addition to the team. I also like the synergy between Zygarde's 4x ice weakness and Ferrothorn's 4x fire weakness, because Ferrothorn's able to Zygarde's able to switch into the 4x fire attacks that would be taking on Ferrothorn and take advantage of it. Ferrothorn's able to kind of switch into the ice type, like it's still neutral, but it's still able to switch into the ice type attacks, take a hit, and start to recover up a little bit more. So overall, I really like that. Next up with my pick, I wanted to get something that in my opinion was probably under-tiered. Like, I remembered it going up for voting and was actually okay with taking it in tier 2 if it was still there. Noticed right before I was about to take it that it was actually in tier 3, not tier 2, which is even better for me. I went ahead and picked up Mimikyu. While prepping for last season, one of the teams I had a ridiculous amount of trouble with, and honestly I was kind of surprised at how much trouble I had with it, because it's kind of like an unconventional team build. But one of the teams that I had a ton of trouble with was HBK's like triple ghost, triple normal core. Because like the things that you would take down the normal types with were the things that the ghosts were immune to, and vice versa. And Mimikyu was a pretty important part of that core for him. Being able to keep up the skies and basically just have a free hit no matter what is a very, very invaluable ability in League format, and honestly kind of one of the best abilities, like, period, I think. Mimikyu's stats are a little underwhelming for what it's trying to do, so like I feel like a lot of people don't really like pay attention to it as much as they should, I guess, because like base 90 attack is okay, but it's not great, and like obviously it's not a special attacker, it's not really bulky, and it's like kind of fast, but it's not super fast. But the fact that it's able to come in on any hit, take 0 damage, and then be able to be okay after that is pretty amazing to me. Mimikyu was actually one of the first Pokemon that I played with in Gen 7 because I was just beyond excited to have a Ghost Fairy. And basically this completes my Fairy Dragon Steel core pretty well, actually. Like, it's not like one of the most flawless Fairy Dragon Steel cores out there, but I think Mimikyu, Ferrothorn, and Zygarde actually complement each other pretty well. Mimikyu is immune to the fighting type attacks that Ferrothorn would be weak to, is able to take on obviously all the things that fairies are strong against. It gets Swords Dance, it gets Shadow Sneak, it actually gets kind of like really random physical coverage like Wood Hammer and stuff too. It got Drain Punch. So overall, like, it has a lot of interesting ways to hit stuff that you wouldn't really expect. Also gets Trick Room, by the way. Just throwing that out there for later. But like overall, it kind of has a lot of like really small stuff that I want to use. And like I said, with this draft, I really honestly just wanted to take things that I wanted this season. Like, that sounds like not the most like sturdy philosophy in the world, but a lot of, like, especially last season, I took a lot of things I wasn't really that comfortable with, was pleasantly surprised when I liked them, and then was just as disappointed when I found out that there wasn't as much depth to everything that I took as I really wanted. So I really wanted to make sure this season that everything that I took was versatile, was able to really come week in and week out if I wanted it to, and if it came every week, it wasn't going to be the same set every week. So with that in mind, I was tempted to stay in Tier 3 and pick up Snorlax here, but I realized that there was a normal type that I kind of wanted a little bit more, honestly. This is another Pokemon that HBK has used pretty well and actually had for 2 straight seasons, so I've kind of seen how annoying it is to prep for 2 seasons in a row now, honestly. And I picked up Swellow, which got a nerf in Gen 7. Got a buff in Gen 7, so it has a little bit more special attack, and I believe a little bit more attack now. I know it got a special attack boost, and I forgot what else got boosted. I don't remember if it was speed or attack. But basically, Swellow is probably one of the most versatile normal flying types there are, I'd say. Because normally, with the normal flying types, or just like the generic birds in general, they're either physical or special. Like, you got stuff like Mega Pidgeot, you got stuff kind of even like Noctowl, honestly, that like can run special sets pretty well. And then you have stuff like Dodrio, and you have stuff like regular Pidgeot that, and like Braviary, I guess, that are more physical. Swellow, in my opinion, is the only one like normal bird that is able to really run both. And because both sets are really difficult and really different from each other, it's really hard to prep for. This also gives me a switch into status, which I didn't have before, thanks to Guts. So if someone's trying to just spread Will-O-Wisps because Zygarde, Ferrothorn, and Mimikyu are all physical, they're going to spread a Will-O-Wisp right on a Swellow. The Swellow is going to get an attack boost, which it would have gotten from a Flame Orb anyway. Be able to fire off Stab Facades, which off of 85 attack doesn't sound like it would do a lot, but because it's 1.5 Guts boosted and Facade would be doubled to 140 damage, suddenly it's doing a lot of damage. On the other side of the spectrum, you can run Scrappy and hit ghost types with Stab Boom Burst, which if you've ever played against an Exploud or something, you know that Stab Boom Burst is ridiculous to switch into. And honestly, if you don't have like a really good Steel type or a really good Rock type or a combination of both, which most teams don't really have a Rock Steel type, Boom Burst is gonna shred through you. Like, it doesn't seem like it should, but if you put a Specs on Swellow and just start spamming Boo Burst at the end of the game, like, you can pretty easily win a lot of the time. It also has some niche stuff as an agility passer if I want to. It is a defogger, which is the first defogger that I actually had on the team. Probably not really going to run it as a defogger that much, but the option is there. It does get Hurricane too if I decide to run Rain one week, which I think I have a Rain option somewhere. It's a very good pivot as well, because a lot of sets decide to run U-turn. But basically, I really wanted Swellow because, first of all, I wanted something with a really good speed tier, and at 125 speed, Swellow's outspeeding a majority of most of the things that I'm going to be facing, especially since it's a basic Pokemon with 125 speed, so I can slap a Scarf on it if I have to outrun some of the most fast Megas out there. I believe it gets Quick Attack too, right? Yeah, so it does get Stab Quick Attack if I want to run a Gut set with that and just kind of pick stuff off late game. In my first couple of picks, I guess you've noticed that I decided to run a lot of priority this season. One thing that bothered the crap out of me last season was that I had all kinds of speed, and then the second anyone came in with like a Mach Punch or a Shadow Sneak or something like that, all of my speed meant nothing. So I wanted to be at least, like, I wanted to have the option to have priority if I wanted it. I'm not going to be running it every week, and I'm not, like, there's some weeks where I'm not going to be running it at all. But I want the option to be there, to be diversified across my team, because I just want to make sure that I don't back myself into a corner any week by just not building the right team. So in round 5, I decided I was going to take my other tier 3 here. There were a couple of Pokemon I was eyeing, but honestly, Snorlax was still on the board, so I just said fuck it and took it anyway. Because Snorlax is a pure normal type and Swellow is a normal flying type, Swellow is actually weak to different things than Snorlax is, even though they share the normal typing. So Snorlax is only weak to fighting and is immune to ghost. Swellow is immune to ghost, weak to electric, and weak to ice, and it's neutral to fighting because flying type resists the fighting weakness. So even though I took 2 normal types back to back, they don't share anything really, like beyond the fact that they can go physical, I guess. But Snorlax is basically just meant to be the bulky thing that kind of ties all of this core together. It gets thick fat, it gets gluttony, which I really liked last season with Alolan Muck, because it's able to use a couple of different berries early. Snorlax is basically just meant to come in, take hits, wear stuff down, and then at the end of the game I'm going to be able to clean up with whatever I need to clean up with. Its physical coverage is off the charts, honestly. Like, it's literally everything you could possibly want. And any kind of setup from Snorlax is pretty scary. It does get Belly Drum, just throwing it out there. But I feel like it's Belly Drum Snorlax is only really common in doubles, but I could see it doing a decent amount of work in singles. And like basically any moves that I would really want to run with Snorlax is here. Any kind of like physical coverage that I would want is here. If I really wanted to get gimmicky, could slap a Specs on this, I guess. Or if I could like call Mind Pass into it, I guess. But overall, like, Snorlax is here to be physical. It's here to be fat. You kind of know what Snorlax does at this point, but I've never gotten to use Snorlax. Every time I've faced Snorlax, like, I always think it's not really going to do a lot, and then it comes in and it just sits there and it does not die. You think you have an option to it, and then it just like only takes 50% from something, eats a berry, and goes right back up to full. So overall, I think Snorlax fits in well. Similar reasons, and in my opinion, it actually fits in a little bit better with the Fairy Dragon Steel Core than Swellow does, but that's okay, because one of my main intentions this season is to give myself flexibility. So like, if I want to run a normal type on the team, I don't have to just run Swellow. Like, I want to be able to kind of mix it up a little bit, so I kind of freed myself away from being against drafting repeat typings, as long as it meant that I was trying to diversify my team a little bit more. Also, as a heads up, if I get distracted at this point, it's because Oats and Goats is currently on playing Super Metroids on Awesome Games Done Quick, and it's going to be awesome. Or Summer Games Done Quick, it's still going to be awesome. So Snorlax is really cool because it has a bunch of different setup that I've wanted to use. Going into the next round, I decided to start trying to fill out my free points. And there's one Pokemon that honestly I've had my eye on like since I started draft format, and it's just never really fit my team before now. This is a Pokemon that has never been drafted in the NES, so I really wanted to try to give it a chance to shine. And since I needed a water type and a psychic type, and I could honestly use a Rapid Spinner, and I could honestly use like a pretty strong special attacker at this point, Starmie seemed to kind of fit the bill like perfectly, I think. Again, it's a Pokemon that like I've really wanted to use for a while, because I feel like it actually has a place in the meta game right now. A lot of people like really loved using Starmie back in Gen 5 and even into Gen 6. And then after Gen 6, it kind of just lost popularity. Mostly because like there's a lot of like really good dark types and stuff right now. But honestly, I think that my team can handle dark types and ghost types especially pretty well. And I wanted a bit more offensive of a water type this season, because I noticed that I tend to kind of do a little bit better with waters that are bulky but more offensive, kind of like Tapu Fini last season, I guess. Because Starmie's from Generation 1, it basically gets all of the dub coverage you could possibly want from a Gen 1 Pokemon. A water type that gets Bolt Beam coverage and Thunderbolt and Ice Beam is pretty awesome. Because it is so fast, it's able to not really invest a lot in a lot of its speed most of the time. Still able to outrun a lot of stuff and then be bulky. 60, 85, 85 bulk isn't really that like exceptional, But if you invest max HP and one of the defenses and you want to slap an Assault Vest on this thing, suddenly it's not really taking hits, or it is taking hits, and it's able to kind of dish out decent amount of damage back. And it also has two pretty useful abilities in Natural Cure and Analytic. So if I want to go more offensive and catch stuff on switches, I can go Analytic. I feel like a lot of people look at Analytic on Starmie and are like, what the fuck, why, like, how many things are you going to be in against that aren't going to outspeed a base 115? But Analytic's there mostly for the effect of trying to catch stuff that switches out, which a lot of stuff does switch out on Starmie. Like, if someone sees a Starmie coming in, they have a Poison Weak thing, they go into their Dark type, you slap that Dark type with a Dazzling Gleam, and suddenly it's coming off of basically like base 130 special attack because you predicted correctly. So it's a Pokemon that I think fits me pretty well. It's a little bit more frail than other coaches would probably be comfortable with, and honestly there's going to be a couple of times where I wish Starmie was a little bit more bulky than it was. But given the surrounding cast for this, I think I can handle it not being the bulkiest thing. Because everything else on my team is thick. So next up is another Pokemon that's never been drafted in the NES before, in Incineroar. I drafted Incineroar this season because it has Intimidate. I'm going to be perfectly honest, like, I eyed Incineroar before now, but it didn't really make sense to take it before now with it only being Blaze. But now that it's able to use Intimidate and actually pivot around and kind of use its good pivoting skills, I'm actually very interested in Incineroar. Because it's a starter, it has very, like, balanced stats, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So even though it's surprisingly hard to take down, like, you wouldn't really expect Incineroar to be like a quote-unquote bulky Pokemon. But if you've ever gone up against it, you just slap an Assault Vest on this thing, give it Drain Punch, and suddenly it's, like, surprisingly difficult. Fire Dark is really cool typing that only the Houndoom line had before this. But it gives me a Fire type and a Dark type, which I didn't have before. I didn't have a Fire type last season, and honestly, it drove me up the fucking wall by the time I was done with it. So I really wanted to make sure that I got a Fire type that I wanted this season. If it wasn't going to be Incineroar, I was probably going to pick up Darmanitan again and just go for full on, like, insane wall breaking and stuff. Probably wouldn't have been the best fit, but it's whatever. I got Incineroar, so it doesn't matter. Incineroar's move pool is very, very good. It's mostly physically based, but it gets pretty much anything that you could really want. Like, it doesn't have Ice Punch, or it does have Thunder Punch. So the only punch it doesn't get is Ice Punch, which is okay. But it gets a lot of other moves. Because it's a Fire type, it gets Will-O-Wisp. It's a faster Taunter, which is nice. It also has its signature Z move and Incium Z. Mimikyu also has its own special Z move, and Snorlax has its own special Z move. That wasn't intentional, by the way, if you were wondering. I didn't really, like, go into this draft thinking I'm just going to take all this stuff that has its own signature Z move. It just kind of happened that way. So back to Incineroar. I'm pretty excited to use this thing. I've honestly only used Incineroar a couple of times in battle, so, like, of anything on my roster, I'm going to say I'm probably the least familiar with Incineroar. But I've seen it do a lot of work. I'm pretty comfortable with Dark types in general. Like, just basically any Dark type I feel like I've used in draft format, it's probably been one of my better Pokemon. So I have a feeling I'll catch on to it pretty soon, and Intimidate with this already bulky team means that it's going to be pretty hard to take down any of my stuff physically, and given how bulky it is especially, it's going to be hard to take down anyway. So next up is a Pokemon that I actually replaced after the draft. I'm going to go ahead and use this time to kind of focus on what I ended my draft with, and then what I did to replace everything, basically, because towards the end of the draft, I'm not really sure if it was just me being tired or me just kind of losing sight of stuff. But you'll notice that as I go through this draft, like, I'm kind of not really focusing at all on my, like, typing weaknesses and stuff, and just trying to draft, like, Pokemon, which was fine for the first half of the draft, but towards the end kind of stopped being good. But one of the Pokemon that I really wanted to use this season, and honestly kind of wish I was able to find a way to keep, is Thundurus Eye. In my opinion, if you're not going to be able to get a Landorus, Thunderous Eye is probably one of the better like legendaries you could take, period. Prankster and Defiant are both awesome abilities in draft format. Its stats across the board, like it's not the bulkiest thing, but offensively it can run literally whatever you want it to do. And because Thunderous has an insane move pool on its own, like you can basically try to do whatever you want with Thunderous and get away with it. It gets Prankster on all of its like very, very good support moves. So Prankster Thunderwave, Prankster Nasty Plot, Prankster Defog, Prankster I already said Thunderwave. Yeah, so any of these moves get Prankster, which is really nice. And then basically once you set up, it actually becomes a pretty intimidating wall breaker. I'm not really sure how to do this, so I guess I'll just go on to the next part and then I'll go back and preface it there. Pokemon number 2 I ended up replacing in this draft that I actually really wanted to use but just didn't fit the final build was Mega Aggron. I realized after I took Thunderous that I needed to take a lower tier Mega, which kind of sucked, but I was alright with it at the time until I looked at what was left in tier 2, and I was like, well, none of these like super fit my team, but I guess I'll take Mega Aggron because I know it's bulky. I could use another Stealth Rocker, even though it's weak to fighting, which I'm kind of starting to develop like more than I would like weakness to. It's overall like bulky enough that it's not really going to matter that it's weak to it because it's still not going down anyway. Also had options to run like rock polish setup stuff and just I think Word at one point even passed Spadef into Mega Aggron and then just used like a Rest Talk set against me. That was fun / annoying to try to break through. And then final Pokemon I was replacing that again I was pretty excited to use is Vivian. After I was trying to work on my tier 5s and stuff, I really wanted a Pokemon that I felt like I was going to be able to show off pretty well, and during my practice games last season, Vivian was a surprisingly like huge threat. Like obviously it's 4 times weak to Stealth Rock. If you're keeping track at home, I currently have 4 Stealth Rock weaknesses and I'm about to draft another, so that was kind of one of the main reasons why I realized holy shit I needed to change around this roster a little bit. The 5th Stealth Rock weakness is one that I'm actually keeping on the team, so I'm going to save it for the end, I guess. But basically when I thought I could actually have Vivian and be okay, I was planning on using it as a really nice Quiver Dance late game sweeper. Compound Eye's Sleep Powder makes it so it's 91% accurate, I think, and then Compound Eye's Hurricane makes it so it's like 85 or 90% accurate or whatever. So even though Vivian's stats like are pretty underwhelming, after it gets a Quiver Dance up, it ends up outspeeding a surprising amount of things and then able to kill with very high power moves that are normally inaccurate. Sorry, but because of Compound Eyes and multiplying accuracy, it ends up actually making it okay. Shield Dust is also a pretty cool ability. I probably wouldn't have ended up running it unless I was running more of like a support Vivian, which I don't know if I would ever really run that in a week that's not a meme week, but it's okay because spoilers, Vivian, Aggron, and Thunderous are not on the team anymore. For the first time in my league history, I decided to use all 3 of my free agency moves immediately to fix my team, because I was not comfortable with the synergy and team building at all. So replacing Thunderous, we have Nihilego. After last season and Super Nerd using it extremely well, I kind of changed my opinion a little bit about Nihilego. I used to think it was a little too expensive for tier 1, and it kind of is on that border between tier 1 and tier 2 in my opinion. But after last season, like just seeing what Nerd could do with it by slapping a scarf on it and just using it as a revenge killer, being able to have another Stealth Rocker as well as Toxic Spikes, which I didn't have before, being able to use Foul Play for stuff that's trying to come in and be like aggressively set up against it. It does get knockoff, which I didn't know before doing this, which is nice. It gets Thunder Wave also. Because it's a poison type, it can spam Toxic and not actually have to worry about it missing. It does also get Trick Room, so that's Trick Room user number 2 for a team that's honestly not super fast, just throwing it out there. But like there's a lot of like really random coverage that Nihilego gets, and unlike some of the other Ultra Beasts, it actually has the coverage to beat the things that normally beat it, because basically just being able to slap Grass Knot on here, hitting a very heavy grounded ground type, I guess, that's actually like coming in to do 4 times super effective damage to you, suddenly able to take it out. I have a fair amount of ground immunities even after trying to weaken my rock weakness and stuff. So even though it's 4 times weak to ground, I think I'm actually able to handle that fairly well. And I'm not really like weak to water or anything, or psychic at all, so it's whatever. But I'm pretty excited to use Nihilego. I've used it a couple of times in randoms and even trying to build an OU team with it and stuff, so like I do know how it works. It's at least bulkier than Cardana physically. It's not much bulkier than Cardana physically, but it is there, and its SPDF, special attack, speed, and HP are all great. So if I ever do want to run this thing as an assault vest user, I can basically just invest in full defense, full HP, or full defense, full speed, or whatever, be able to just have very good special bulk anyway, and then actually probably take a hit or two physically if I need to and just sweep. Nihilego is meant to be the late game sweeper / hazard setter if I go early game route with it, so it's kind of nice that it fits that niche on my team anyway. Change number 2, I guess I should have probably done this one third, but it's whatever. I decided to drop Mega Aggron, which didn't really make a ton of sense on my team, for Mega Audino, which at first glance you're like, why did you just trade one wall for the other wall? But Mega Audino is kind of more of a dedicated wall in my opinion. It has better bulk on both sides. It has less attack, meaning that it's kind of like dedicated to being a little bit more cleric-y most of the time. But it does have usable special attack as well as a pretty decent move pool to take advantage of it. So stuff that is a 4 times weakness, or has a 4 times weakness that tries to come in and set up on a Dino, normally can't. It's a very good wish passer. It's a very good cleric, which my team did not have before now, and it's probably the most solid Trick Room user that I have. So 25% of my team can use Trick Room. I'm not going to be bringing it every week, obviously, but I'm just throwing it out there now because coaches do need to prep for it. I do have a lot of very, very, very slow things on my team by design, so if I want to run a full Trick Room team, I actually have that mode on my team. Because I've noticed this league has just kind of been skewing more and more just insane speed to outspeed everyone, when I think that a Trick Room option, at least on a team, is pretty viable. It's not like, I don't think it's something that works well enough that you want to build your entire team around it, but I wanted to at least have the option present if worst came to worst, I guess. So there's a lot of like really cool support moves that I don't frankly want to get into with Mega Audino, but it's a cleric that my team did not have before. It's my 3rd normal type, but it's also another normal type that's not weak to fighting. And it's a duplicate fairy typing for Mimikyu, but I think that's actually okay. First of all, because Nerd ran last season with an offensive fairy and a defensive fairy, and I actually really liked it from what I gathered, like him just being able to mix up if he wanted the fairy for the offensive typing or the defensive typing. Kind of gave him a little bit more flexibility during team building. I'm gonna be honest, Mega Audino is not something I plan on bringing every week, but when it comes, I expect it to kind of do a decent amount. And honestly, every time I faced it last season, whether in practice or otherwise, I fucking hated it. So I figure if I hated it, it's probably a pretty good mon, so I should probably try to pick it up. Free agency move number 3, because Mega Aggron is a tier above Mega Audino, I actually got 20 free agency points back, which meant that I was able to move from tier 5 with Vivian up to tier 4 to pick up Hitmontop. Hitmontop gives me another Intimidate user if I want it, so I can pivot back and forth between Incineroar and Intimidate, or Incineroar and Hitmontop, and just keep spamming Intimidate to lower attack, which makes my already bulky team even harder to go through. Because my team's already bulky, I don't have to run Intimidate every time and can actually take advantage of Technician. If you watched my NES Season 1, you know the Technician is probably one of, if not my favorite ability. because it gives boosts to a lot of moves that you really wouldn't other see before. Hitmontop, again, kind of keeping with the theme of the rest of the roster, has a lot of really nice priority options. It gives me another rapid spinner. It gives me a fighting type, which I didn't have before. And of all of the fighting types in tier 4, outside of Hariyama, I would say the Hitmontop is probably the bulkiest and hardest to take down in one hit. Even Hariyama can kind of get taken down with like a Hurricane, but because Hitmontop has a lot of Spadef, it can normally take one if it needs to, especially if it has Assault Vest. So overall, of all the fighting types that I actually did want in this draft, Hitmontop was extremely high up there, mostly because of Double Intimidate, because I've never had Double Intimidate before, and it seems like a kind of cool thing to tech on some weeks for incredibly high attack teams and stuff. As well as being able to run Technician with priority if I don't feel like running it on Zygarde or Mimikyu or Swallow. I think that's it, but like if I don't feel like running it on any of them, I could run Technician and just spam Technician Fake Out, Technician Bullet Punch, Technician Mach Punch. I wanted to make sure that I actually got it before I said that. But yeah, overall, pretty excited for Hitmontop, and honestly, I think between Hitmontop, Nihilego, and Mega Audino, my team is so much better than it was with Thundurus, Aggron, and Vivian. Like I was kind of honestly freaking the fuck out when I like looked at this roster for the first time and realized how many things I actually needed to fix to make it okay. Shout outs to everyone that helped me fix that, by the way, because I had to go through a million different rosters, and I think Sunny actually was the one that ended up suggesting the final 3 that I went with, which is kind of funny because I ended up playing her first this season, but it's okay. So the final Pokemon, 41 minutes in, the final Pokemon that I ended up taking this season when tier 5 was Golbat. I've honestly never used Golbat competitively. Like I know that it was a Pokemon that I've seen a lot of people just instantly fall in love with. This doesn't look like great stats, by the way, but because Golbat's not a fully evolved Pokemon, it's able to hold Eviolite, which gives a 1.5 defense boost and a 1.5 Spadef boost just because it's an unevolved Pokemon. So suddenly this thing, which looks like about as bulky as Starmie, if not bulky, is able to have an item that gives it a free Assault Vest and a free defensive Assault Vest, with the ability to also toxic things with impunity, especially because it has Infiltrator, by the way, so you can't even sub up on this. You can Toxic whatever you want, you can Super Fang whatever you want, you can Brave Bird whatever you want. It's a great defogger because even though it's flying, it's still so hard to take down that you can normally get a defog off. It's not really the most offensive because it only has base 80 attack and 65 special attack, but just throwing it out there, it does get nasty blot. I was honestly planning on drafting Crobat this season, but I got sniped on Crobat I think Crobat went like round 4 or round 5 or something, and that was like a full like 2 or 3 rounds earlier than I was really planning on taking it. So good job on that, coach, because they got it when they needed to. I was not planning on taking it then, but it's fine. Okay, so I said I wasn't going to do editing, but I'm going to have to do a cut there because I accidentally hopped back into my Discord chat and showed some stuff I probably shouldn't have been showing to people. But anyway, this is my NES Season 5 draft doc sheet, which kind of shows my average stats, typing, and all that. Overall, this team is infinitely bulkier than any other team I've drafted, but I'm really okay with that because that was kind of what I was setting out for this season. As I was drafting a team for the Detroit Darkrais and myself, I kind of tried to make, because we both kind of have similar play styles, I kind of tried to make both of our rosters a fusion of what each other would take, I guess. One of my main issues with my roster last season was that it was too hyper offensive, and that once I ran into a team that could kind of take on my hyper offense, I just kind of petered out like every single week. And that's kind of what happens when you have hyper offense that plays bulky offense or even like stall and stuff, is that most of the time you can't really break through. With stall, it's a little bit easier to break through because you can use setup and stuff. But like with bulky offense versus hyper offense, I normally have a really hard time as the hyper offensive team because you pretty much have to play perfectly, or you just kind of run out of steam before you're able to finish the game. So that was one thing that I really wanted to make sure I didn't do this season. I really wanted a good mix of speed tiers, and while my team is on the slower end than I would normally care for, I do have a lot of really fast things, such as Swellow, such as Starmie, such as Nalego, and I have multiple Trick Room options that are pretty solid in my opinion. So honestly, my low speed isn't really the biggest concern to me in my opinion. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty excited for this roster, especially after the moves I made. I'm out of free agency moves already, and the season hasn't even started. But it's okay because normally, like, honestly, every single season I've drafted, I think I end up making at least one move before the season starts. Most of the time I end up making multiple, and most of the time I end up having trades and stuff anyway. So honestly speaking, this is probably not even the final roster of this, as I'm probably going to trade one or two things away over the course of the season. But as of right now, everything on this team has a spot, at least in my heart. I don't know if it has a spot on the roster, but everything is something that I really love, and I honestly think really fits together very well. One of the things that I really wanted this season is I wanted to be able to bring almost any combination of any 6 mons and have it be a functioning team. Because one of the problems I had last season was if I brought Tapu Fini, I almost had to bring Kartana, and I almost had to bring Mega Alakazam. And like, yeah, Fini, Kart, Zam is a fucking terrifying like trio to get through, but it's not unbeatable. And once you broke down any one of those members that you knew was coming every week, it became like very, very predictable. So that was one thing I wanted to avoid this season. I want you to fear all 11 things I'm bringing every single week, and obviously I'm going to have to work harder to make people fear Mega Audino than I am Mega like Zygarde. But I kind of want to get to the point where people have to be terrified of everything that I have. I feel like my natural bulk on the team is going to be able to allow me to invest a lot more in offenses than I normally would be able to. And honestly, that's kind of more my play style. I've noticed that once I draft things that are naturally bulky, I'm normally able to take offenses that nobody would really see and turn a bulky team into offensive, rather than take a team that's already very offensive and try to find additional bulk to it, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm kind of just rambling because I honestly just am trying to get all of my thoughts out in this video because it's been a little while and I missed making a video for you guys. But thank you for watching this really long video. I'll probably put a timestamp in the beginning so you can just cut to this part if you don't want to watch me go through pick by pick and talk about everything. But if you did click that timestamp and you now kind of want to see my thought process for this draft, thanks for wanting to watch my content more, I guess. If not, it's fine. Week 1 of the NES starts not this immediate week, but the week of, I think the thread goes up on 4th of July and battles are due July 10th. So expect a video in the coming weeks of that battle. I haven't really scheduled it yet with Sunny, and I also haven't really started practicing yet, so like expect it in like a week or two, I guess. But this is kind of to tide you guys over until then, let you know that I am still alive and that I still am trying to make some NES content. If you guys are interested in it, honestly, I could really appreciate the support on this video because like I am kind of hesitant about continuing the series. But I'm not gonna like beg for it, I guess. If you want to support it, go for it. If not, it's whatever. So thank you guys for coming out. Have a good day, and I'll see you with my week 1 battle with Sunny, or more soon than that, probably some random Super Mario stuff. But have a good one, and I'll see you later. Bye.